everyone, it's Claire here from Sewn by Claire, and today we're going to be making another outfit from out of the Meadowsweet Collection by Luna Lapin, and you'll find that in this booklet just here, which is the Meadowsweet pattern pack. I'd like to say a really big thank you to Linda Lowe, who has sponsored the purchase of the pattern booklet for me, because we wanted to make the old schoolroom dress, which obviously we've done now, schoolroom, schoolhouse. I always get it wrong, I still do. And for those that are in the large Facebook group for Luna Lapin that's run by Cool Crafting, and Cool Crafting is the company and the designer behind everything Luna Lapin related, and you can find their kits and this booklet on their online shop, and I'll put the link just up here for you so you can go and have a look at that. If you've been in that larger group, then you will have known, or you will have heard, that there's been a little bit of issue, shall we say, just around some of the sizing on some of these garments, because whilst they are designed for Bramble Bear, and we've got a Bramble just here to show you, who has a very nice round tummy and quite thick arms, the bouclé that's used to make Bramble actually has some stretch to it. So therefore there's a bit of variation depending, I'll just put the booklet down, and there's a bit of variation there depending on how firmly you stuff your Bramble's limbs and also Bramble's tummy. So in some cases we've had to enlarge the pattern, and I did that for the old schoolroom dress, and I didn't do any changes to the pinafore dress, and both of those tutorials and sew alongs are already live on my channel, so they're already there for you if you fancy having a go at making those, along with the alterations that you'll need to make the bodice and sleeves bigger here, and then just slightly bigger just under the arm as well, so that it's a bit more flattering on Bramble and just looks a little bit nice. It doesn't look quite so tight. So we're going to do the same again with the outfit that we're going to be doing today, because today we're going to be making the waistcoat, which is Bramble sporting on the front here, which is part of the Meadowsweet suit, it's called, and it's actually called the Milliner's waistcoat. So let me just find you a better picture of that one so you can have a look. Here it is in here. So there's the Milliner's waistcoat with a lovely contrast lining, buttons down the front and those two patch pockets. But what I'm going to do first is we're going to follow a dressmaking tip, and that is to make a toile first. And a toile is just a practice garment, and it's just made out of an old sheet or an old duvet cover, just any scrap fabric that you've got that you won't be using for anything else. Because it's a really good way of just making up a mock sample and just seeing how it's going to fit before we cut into our precious top fabric, fashion fabric, whatever you want to call it. Because that way we can just save any errors, or we can accommodate any errors at the beginning, and then that's just going to make everything just much better later on. So that's what we're going to do. First of all, we're going to do all the same things that we have to do anyway, which is going to trace our pattern off, and with the Meadowsweet pattern you get a separate pattern sheet like this one which folds out. So you need to go along and follow any of my other videos that tell you how to use either greaseproof paper or tracing paper in order to trace that off. And some people actually do use fusible, non-fusible fleece as well. Can't help but cuddle them, Bramble, so cute. So that you can use those types of mediums as well instead of a tissue paper to trace out a pattern if you wanted to. I just use tissue paper because I'm used to paper patterns, and that's the way I go. I wouldn't ever cut up the main pattern sheet that came with the pattern. I always keep that intact with my pattern booklet, and I always trace off from there, because then you've always got that master copy for the future for making any parts. You're never going to lose a piece because you've always got everything there on that master sheet. So that would be tip number one, would be get in the habit of tracing off or making another pattern from your master, because then you can use that one. And if you slice a little bit off with your scissors or your rotary cutter when you're cutting it out, you can always at a later date go back to your master copy and trace off another one, and you're good to go again. You've got it there straight away. The other thing is, I find that the photocopier paper, or the paper that when you get a sheet like this is printed onto, is really thick, and the fabric will distort underneath, whereas with a tissue paper you can feel if you've got any wrinkles underneath your pattern piece, paper pattern pieces, and with photocopier paper you can't really, and it could distort it. So for the best results, my recommendation would be to trace it off, and that's what I do with all of my patterns and keep those safe. It doesn't take long once you get used to doing it, seriously, it really doesn't, but I think because the patterns are such an investment, you then save in the long run. Okay, enough of that. Let's talk about the pattern. I'll tilt the camera down and we'll get started. But before that, what I'll do is I'll just pop a quick picture in here to show you what the finished waistcoat looks like, so that you can decide if you want to go ahead and make this for your Bramble as well. So I'll pop that in here, then I'll tilt the camera down and we'll get started on the video. Okay, I'll see you in a minute. So I'm just jumping back in, as I said I would, to show you the finished waistcoat, which is this one just here. Hopefully you can see that, with these lovely pockets on here, not a bit of lining showing. And also to talk about, we've made some pattern adjustments as well for the waistcoat to make sure that it fitted. And I go through all the process of the toile, how we make that, which is just a quick practice garment, before we cut into our precious wool. And then I show you how to do pockets 2 ways, so that you've got a choice on that. And then finally we finish off with the buttonholes. It is a long video and this is a simple garment, but as I say at the end of the video, there's nowhere to hide with your stitching if it doesn't quite go right. So that's why I've taken time. Plus we've talked about pattern adjustments, plus we've talked about the 2 ways of doing the pockets, and then we've talked about buttonholes and doing buttonholes at the end. So it's packed in a lot and hopefully you'll enjoy it. So for now, I'll stop waffling and let you get on. I'll see you soon. Okay, so we've got our pattern pieces here. We've got the back of the waistcoat. These have just been rough cut for the moment. I'll cut these out when we do our first bit of cutting out. And we've got a fold line here, so the centre back goes on the fold. We need to cut one in our in the fold on the main fabric and one in the fold on our lining. We've then got the front of the waistcoat here, and we've got the pocket placement on there. We're going to cut 2 of that in the main and 2 in the lining. And we need to remember that anywhere where we're going to cut 2, especially when it's not a symmetrical shape, we need 1 cut that way and 1 cut that way, because you need a left and you need a right. And if you've got your fabric single on the top, I normally do double for dressmaking, but if you were to do it single, maybe you've got stripes to match up, or you're trying to pattern match it or anything like that, or you've not got enough and you can't do it double, then always remember you need 1 with the right side facing up and 1 with the right side facing down to give you that left and that right. But if you cut on the double, you'll be fine. And then we also need to do the same on the pockets. Now the interesting thing for me is that on the pockets it says to cut 2 in main and cut 2 in lining. I don't know that we need a lining on this pocket, because the fabric that we will end up using is a wool suiting, and I feel that it could be a bit thick. The other thing is that if we do it like that as well, we can get an edge round the edge of the pocket that shows on the right side of our garment. And because these are decorative and won't ever be functional, as it might be on an adult clothing or a child's clothing, then I think I'm going to suggest that we don't cut 2. I'll cover what you need to do if you do want to line them, but I'll also say that what I suggest we do is that we don't actually line it, and we just edge that edge and stitch it down, and then we can do a normal edging that we would normally do. I'll have a play and see, because then, but this is the beauty of doing the videos, is I try just to help you along a little bit and just to see what we can do, but the pocket will fit on there eventually. So go ahead and trace your fabric, your pattern pieces off. You just need the 3, the back, the front and the pocket, and then we'll be good to go. Also, you'll just need to find some fabric for a toile. Now I've just found this cotton batik that I had, that I salvaged from an old shirt of my husband's, and this will be perfect, I think, just for cutting out the right amount that we need just to be able to get this out. I might have to just do a bit of jiggling to get the piece out, but I've got another piece there as well. For a toile, I won't cut out the pockets. We're just going to do the front and the back, because we're just checking the fit. Now so we're just checking the fit. So I will leave it at that. I was going to go on to something else then, could you tell? Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to put our fabric together and cut out our toile, and then we'll be ready for working. Okay, so we've got our fabric. I folded my fabric in half to give me 2 mirror copies. I've made sure that the bottom edge is together and the straight edge is there, and we've got a nice long line there to put our lining on our top onto. So I'm now just going to position my pattern piece so that the straight edge of that fold line is right against that edge. Just make sure that when you've got your fabric folded in half, you're not going to lose some at the very top. And let's put a pin in to hold that in place at the top. And then I go straight down to the bottom and find the position on the bottom, and then that anchors that fabric on. Just make sure that it's not pulling up like it was slightly. Oh, pinned on, we don't want to go through. Batik is quite a densely woven fabric, so but it'll be fine for the toile. It's just needed just to just putting your pins through can just be a little bit tricky. Okay, so that's that piece pinned on. And then we're going to take the front. Now, because I've got edges, that's my cut edge there on the edge, so I know I can overlap it slightly should I need to. So I can butt that right in, but not over, so that I'm not going to lose any of the pattern. Make sure that that's straight all the way down, and make sure that that's straight at the top there as well. I'm just wondering if that might be better that way around. No. Okay, and then we're just going to pin these pieces on. I'm not worrying too much about grain at this stage. We will do when we're working with our suiting, because we've got stripes on that, and so they absolutely do need to be straight. So pin those on and just cut those out, and then we'll be ready to work with our toile. Okay, so here we've got our pieces. We've got our back that's been cut on the fold, just there. And we've got our two front pieces. And this is what I was talking about when you're doing a left and a right, because if this is our top of our fabric, and let's just put a pin in like I normally do just to mark it. We don't necessarily need to, but it's just to demonstrate the point. And then if that was folded with wrong sides together, shall we say. So this will be our other front. So the pin marks the front. So when you have your fabric with the wrong side or right sides together, you automatically get a left and a right straight away. It's called mirroring. And if you'd have cut them on the flat and you'd have had one that way and you cut out two, then your top would have been this way round and you'd have had two rights or two lefts. So that's why we need to have that one where it turns over so that it can actually meet in the middle. Okay, so let's just put a pattern to the side for one moment, because say we're just making a toile just to fit this on. And what we're going to do now is, with our right sides down onto our fabric, we can then, onto our back fabric, we can take the pin out that I used to mark it, and we are just going to match up these shoulder seams and these side seams. It's really easy and straightforward on a toile, because we're not worrying about double-sided fabrics or for nice neat edges or anything like that. It literally is, let's just bang this together and try it on so that we can see how that's going to look. So this is our other one. Let's just match the other shoulder up. So I'm just turning it down to the right side is down onto the fabric. With this fabric you can't tell which is right side and wrong side, but it was the first one I grabbed. And you could be doing this with your duvet cover, old sheet, old pillowcase, old shirt from the charity shop bag that you were selling out. And what we're going to do then is we're going to sew along both of these two shoulders. So we've got those shoulders pinned. But while we're there, we're also going to just do these side seams as well. So let's just match up these side seams, because that'll be quicker when we actually go to our sewing machine. So there's one just there, and here's the other. And we're going to sew these with our 1/4 inch seam allowance. This is what I call quick and dirty sewing. It's just no seam finishes. You know, you are matching everything up. You get your raw edges together, but you just need to just bang this together as quickly as possible so that you can try it on. Because then we're just trying to do this now so that we've got any pattern alterations for the paper pattern before we cut into our main fabric. So 4 seams. Side seam, shoulder, shoulder, side seam, and then we're good to go. The only thing that I did mark on it was the position of the buttonholes, because when we have that on, that'll help us put those on both sides. We can just put a pin through that stage, and that will help us determine whether there's enough to go around Bramble's tummy. Let me get my machine set up and get these stitched, and then we'll try on. Okay, so just turning I've just got it on a normal stitch length. Just going to do 1/4 inch seam allowance. I will reverse at the end and start again. We'll put the needle down in the work just so that we can do these seams. To save thread, we can even just carry across to the new seam that we're doing. Just don't take your pins out, don't sew over pins. When you're sewing a toile, you are really just trying to check for fit. It depends. The more seams you've got and the more fitted a garment is, obviously the more essential it is when you're dressmaking for yourself to check that. But this will just demonstrate exactly why we use a toile. And and what a great aid it can be. Got my snips. To one side for a minute, and now we can just snip through those carry threads that we had just quickly. Just take those all off. Okay, so we have, ta-da, we have a waistcoat. But what we can do now with Bramble is we can just put his arms through. So it is quite snug round his arm, look. I mean, we're going to have 1/4 inch taken off there. The other arm in, Bramble. That's it. So around his neck and his shoulders it's not too bad. Let's just pin over those. Okay, it's not too bad. I think I am going to scoop out a little bit for his arms because that does look really quite tight. Can you see how tight that is? And even if we were cutting back 1/4 inch, that's still going to catch on his arms, I think, slightly. The neck looks all right by the time that that's been taken down. Let's have a look at the back. Yeah, a few drag lines there. I might add a little bit extra in the back just to give a little bit more for around his bottom, especially once he's got his trousers on as well, if we want this, because it's going to go up by 1/4 inch just there. But even still, if we're going to want to have that to sit really nicely, I think for my Bramble is going to need a little bit more. And the buttons in this thin fabric only just fit over. So I think adding a little bit on the back is just going to help and just scoop out under the arms. Okay, let's do these pattern alterations then, and I'll show you how to do those. Hold on one second. So I know I did that kind of whipped his waistcoat on and whipped it off really quickly. But I hopefully you got the gist of what I was saying, because I was kind of thinking out loud, if that makes sense, rather than actually sort of sharing with you. I think that the waistcoat looks fairly well sized once you're on the actual table, but when it was actually on Bramble, you know, if we're thinking about how this is going to look because the fabric is going to be thicker, then under that arm does feel a little snug around the arm side there, and we can just lower that down and take it out. It'll just give that little extra room. And then for me it's just catching on the back of his bottom here a bit. And if you wanted it buttoned up because you may not have a shirt on underneath, then you know you're going to want that to sit nicely and look nicely, and it probably just fits round at the moment. That's why I'm thinking of giving a little bit extra room to that, so that it kind of just does allow that to go forward. On dressmaking, you'd look at the side seams here and see, are they running parallel to the floor, and I'd say that that's probably just pulling slightly to the back, which again is why, you know, we need some more. And these garments aren't going to fit perfectly because, you know, it's a toy, but just for the purposes of what we're doing, then it's quite interesting. So let's just show you how to do this, because it really is quick and easy, and if you like the way the garment fits, then don't worry at all. But for me, as I say, it just makes me think that I want to make those changes. Let me just grab a coloured pen. Should have got that before, my apologies. Okay, so I've just got a coloured pen here, and I've got it's called a French curve, but you can use any kind of, so you can use this is a French curve ruler, so it's got this, you probably can't see it very well, but it's got like a curved edge. So it is particularly for matching up and for dressmaking, but you don't need to use that. On these small patterns, we can just freehand it to a certain extent. So what I'm going to do is, if I can find my seam gauge, which always wants to go, or a tape measure, here's a tape measure, let's use that instead. Is I'm just going to measure down 1/4 inch. I think just 1/4 inch is just going to give us enough just to make a difference. So 1/4 inch on the front and 1/4 inch on the back, because that's going to really, you know, you've got it on both sides. So I've got to put a little green mark at the 1/4 inch mark on the back of the arm side here. So that's the side seam there, and that's on both of those. And then I'm going to then just scoop it out and then join up to this existing line. So this is where your seam curve, your French curve comes in. But we've got to find where and you just adjust it until you find a mark that you're happy with. So that's quite nice. Let me just take that off just there. So literally I'm going to take off this amount just here. Let me just mark through it. You can see that green shaded line. And that's just going to lower it down, because by the time we've actually got 1/4 inch for the seam allowance as well anyway, then that's just going to account for that. It doesn't look like a lot, but you'll be surprised what a difference it makes. So let's do that one first. And all I've done there is I've just sort of curved it up to nothing. So the shoulder still stays the same, and the top part of the arm side, but it's just from about a third down that I've then changed it. So now I'm going to just cut out this pattern piece on the curved line, and now we're going to do the same with the back and the front. So let's just put the back and the front together on that side seam. Our line should mark up and the top of our shoulder should mark up. Probably draw it in first. You can just pin your pattern pieces together if you wanted to. Probably as easy, isn't it? So just pin that together, and then let's just join our side seam up together. And you can see from the shaping that is formed when you actually have to just put these on top of each other. And then all I'm going to do is now just snip off on the back piece the same amount, just so that those two match when they're lined up. So literally we're just taking off those two little pieces. It's not a lot, but it will make a difference. So that's take those pins out of there. So that's the front adjusted, because that was the only thing that we were doing on the front. And then on the back, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line that is parallel to the fold line here. And I'm just going to take it up towards the shoulder. So I was just pointing to the top of the neckline, and this is just going to give us a bit of an angle. So then what I'm going to do then is I'm going to cut all the way up that line there. Almost up to the top, but I'm not going to go through the shoulder. I'm just going to go right up to the line, but not through it. So it ends up being a little bit like a hinge, and that will make sure that we don't lengthen that seam at all, because that seam has to tie onto the shoulder seam there, so we don't want to alter that. Once you've got that in place, we'll get a spare piece of tissue paper, and we want some sellotape. And then I'm going to use the folded edge, and I'm just going to sellotape that down to the spare piece of paper here. Making sure that the paper just extends down a little bit, because we'll have to true up the hem as well. So I'll just pop that in there. There are alterations on my old schoolroom dress for how to alter that dress as well. And because this pattern piece is in half, not literally in half, but because it's a half of the back and then it's then folded out when it's cut, whatever we do to this side will then be also put into the corresponding other half that is cut. So when we're adding room into the back of this waistcoat, if we add 1/4 inch on our cut line, it'll actually add 1/2 inch to this waist seam across. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to add 1/4 inch. So from this bottom edge down here, there's my tape measure, let's use tape measure instead. I'm going to add that 1/4 inch. Do you add 1/4 inch or add 1/2 inch? Just over 1/4 inch I'm going to add. Could you hear me thinking then? So that's our line there. Just because we don't want too much that it's flapping around on him, but we want enough that he's going to be fine. So that's what it looks like. So I've got, there's the end, and that's the half of the pattern all stuck down. This is my loose side, and I've measured in and marked my mark, and it's about 5/8 of an, oh, I lost Bramble then. Right, it's just over 1 centimetre. And then we then slide in this side, making sure that you're straight at the top up here, and you can put some sellotape at the top here if you want to, just to make sure that that all stays nice and fixed for you. And then we move out, just pivot out this side one, pull it away until it meets the same place. Make sure your line's straight, and then just tape it in place. And then all we need to do then is, and there's no difference really on the bottom here, so we can just go across the bottom. There's maybe just a slight curve, but nothing much at all. And then we cut this out at the top here as it was originally as well, just because it's extended back up over that shoulder. If yours hasn't, you don't need to do that. And then we can cut away any excess paper on the back here that we then don't need anymore. We just need to cover that gap. It's just plugging the gap, isn't it, where we've altered it. And there's our altered pattern piece. So hopefully that's made sense as to what you do with that. So now I'm going to use this for cutting out on our fabric. That's all the pattern adjustments I'm going to make. I'm happy with the rest of it. And as I say, we will just then work with these two. We lowered the arm side down by that 1/4 of an inch, just to give that little bit more room just here. And we've added probably about an inch in the width across here as well. So let's talk about fabric. Okay, so the fabric that I've ordered is this pure wool from Cool Crafting, and it's got this lovely pink and then this white pinstripe in it, and I really liked that. It's almost like on a chocolate brown, and I think that's going to look really nice against against Bramble's bouclé colour, so I think that'll look really nice on him. And I ordered half a metre because I think the length of it for the trousers, we needed a longer piece than just a quarter metre, so I ordered half and thought, well, it'll come in handy for other things as well. So have a look and just decide which is your right side and your wrong side. For me, the pink stripe is slightly more prominent on this side, so this is going to be my right side, and I'm going to fold it so that we've got right sides together. So I'm folding it along with the selvage edge going north to south for me, and then we've got all these stripes going north to south as well. Hopefully you've seen those. Looks lovely, lovely fabric. I haven't pre-washed it, but if you think that this is going to be pre-washed because of your character's clothes, maybe that it's for a child, then you probably will want to pre-wash it. And then what we're going to need to do is work out how wide it needs to be, probably just a little bit more, in order to have our pieces put on. And what I'm going to do then is choose a line along here. I think what I'll do is I'll get these both out side by side at the top. So you need to fold over a little bit more, look. You know I hate wasting fabric. If you've watched any of my videos before, you know how much I really, really hate wasting fabric. So I'll try and get it all together as best as I can. A little bit more. Okay, so let's now choose a stripe, and I'm going to actually fold my fabric so that that stripe is right on the edge of the fold line, and I've got a pink stripe going down, and that will be nice. And I'm just going to put a little pin at the bottom here and just a pin at the top just to hold it so it doesn't start to go skew when we start to work with it. I've not put any pins in the middle because I'll be able to remember where we are with that. The other thing that we can do is just make sure that the stripes, if they are going to, can match up on here, yeah, and all the pink stripes are matching up on top of each other along the top edge here. So let's just put a pin in there to hold that together too. It's just going to make sure that those stripes stay true for us all the way down. Very little stretch to the fabric, but it is just nice just to have it as straight as we can do all the way down. Just smooth it down with your hands. Got it off the table, so let's just make sure that's not got any drag on it as well. Okay, so the first piece we're going to place is the back. I'm turning it over because of the way I'm working with my fabric, and we can take it up towards the top as much as possible. If you're working with a tartan, just be aware of your horizontal lines, because if possible you'd want your horizontal lines to match across this side seam if you can for your pattern matching. But for this we're just going to go all the way down, and on the top here, when you fold it over, can you see how I've got a slight difference between the two edges at the top here of mine? Might not be able to see very well, but just be careful that you don't go right up to the top and then you lose a bit off the top of your fabric. So I need to know that I can't go all the way to the top. Make sure my pink stripe is still down that side, and then I'll just move that pin there and put that in to hold that in place. And I'll take that pin out the bottom there and move that one up into place as well, just to hold that fold line straight first. Then we're going to take some more pins and pop those in just to hold this all nice and flat for us. Just make sure your ends of your pins don't protrude out. And then we're now going to choose. So the line I'm going to match up for mine is going to be the buttonhole line here. And if I just fold that pattern piece back so that the buttonholes are right on the edge of that pattern piece, I can now match that up also with a pink line. Make sure that when you fold it out, you've still got room. And I just want to make sure that if I fold my fabric back, that that pink line is on top of each other as well. Yeah, because otherwise that's going to be out as well. So let's match it at the top too, so we're not wasting any fabric. Pink line for the buttonhole, so then I put a pin in at the bottom, hold that still, and a pin in at the top, hold that still. We know that our pink line is matching at the very top through both layers, and that I've just checked it on the back edge there, and then we can fold that out now. We've got it held in place top and bottom, and then that will work for us. The other thing you can do is cut your front out on a single piece of fabric and do one left and one right as we've done before, in order that you're happy that your buttonhole markings are what's going to keep your stripe straight for you, but this should work for us quite nicely. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to have my pattern. Now let's have a look at our pocket, because, right, I'm going to cut these two pieces out first, then I'm going to come back to cut out my pocket, because I'm going to pattern match the stripes going through my pocket onto my waistcoat. If you aren't bothered about that, just go ahead, place your pocket. This is your straight edge just here that you can use. Pop that onto whatever colour stripe you want, and then just make sure it's straight as far as you can do top and bottom. Pop that on and pin it round and cut it out. But for now, I'm going to leave that to one side because I'm going to pattern match that when we get a chance to do that. So now let's get scissors and we're going to cut this out. Ready for working with it. Okay, so there we've got those cut out. The back, there's no markings on there at all, that's all fine, but I'm going to suggest that we put a couple of markings onto the pocket here so that we can see how we are when we're working with our stripes, and also popping on that pocket itself. It'll just help us with the sighting of it. So let's get a nice bright colour of fabric, of thread. I've got some yellow here that we can just use. We're doing just a few tailor's tacks. Thread that up onto our needle. So I've got my needle threaded, but I've not put a knot at the end. And I'm just going to put a tailor's tack at the top edge of each of these pockets, going through all the layers, and I make one stitch going through, leaving a tail left to right, and one going north to south, and then leave a loop, and then leave a tail as well. And you end up with a tuft of threads like this on the front, and you get a little mark on the back. Remember, this is through both lots of fabric at the moment. So let's just do one there and then do one at the other end of the top of the pocket, just in exactly the same way. And then the other one that I will do, just leave it. You have to leave quite a long tail on these. I'll show you why in a second, because we've got lots of fabric to go out to. And then the other one that I'm going to do, didn't make my thread long enough, is at the bottom corner of this pocket as well, where I just trace those lines on, because that will just gives us that placement line, just to say, well, okay, the pocket's going down here and going across to there. So let's just take that out there. So now we can unpin our fabric, but just keep a couple of pins steady, because we need to be marking this right side and wrong side as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is peel back my pattern and then we put it right sides together, didn't we? So I'm going to put a pin first, just through the shoulder, a double sort of link of pin on both those two right sides before I remove my pattern, and that just tells me that's the right side. Now lift off your pattern carefully, just hold on to your thread so that they stay through, and that's marked those lines quite nicely. And then what we do then is we just separate out the two strips of fabric with our bridge of threads. See the bridge of threads just there going through, and then we snip through those threads, and then we move along to the next one and snip through that. Make sure you don't snip through your fabric at all. We've just got one more left, and then that's why you need your long thread, so that you can actually snip through. You've got enough to make a bridge of threads, and then we've got those places marked on those three on that side, which is that's the right side there, and then we've also got those three places marked on this side as well. And we can see the pattern matching is pretty good, so we're just to one side of a pink on that one, and so that should just be about right. So let's get our pattern, and we've got a drawn line on here for the stitching. So I'm going to just fold the pattern back on the stitching line on that front foot curved edge just there. Can you see I drew over my stitching line, which was the dotted line? It doesn't look very dotted on mine, but that's just straight down, and that goes from that corner point there all the way down. And I'm just going to fold back the edge on the top there, perhaps fold it back the other way because we're going to draw on this pattern to draw our stripes. So fold that back, and that gives us that centre point. Then we can match up those points there onto our fabric. So I'm actually going to be matching a white line down there. Snip a pen, got a pink line here. So where's our pink line? Our pink line starts there and then comes out here. So I now know, so let me just show you that again. So what I've done is I've folded back the top edge of the pattern on the stitching line and the side edge on the stitching line. So that exposed this edge here, this corner here. I've then put that onto my tailor's tacks because we know that the corners are going to correspond with the corners on the pattern. And then I've looked for one of the lines, and I've chosen a pink line, and I've matched that on the top of my pattern there where it went onto the pattern and then where it came off the pattern. So it's like that at the bottom where the pink line is and pink line there. Because now what I can do is, now if I unfold this line here, if we get a little ruler, I can join those two with a dotted line. You can do this in pencil if you wanted to as well. I'm just doing it in a bright colour so that you can see. So I want a pink line to go through there, and then I'll be able to, there, closest damn it, match up my pattern piece onto my fabric. So let's go back to my fabric. I'm going to cut my two pockets out singularly this time. Pins out the way, all getting all in a mess. Those two pieces to one side. So position it again, so find a pink stripe there. You can even fold it back on that line as well that you can see through. Offer it up to a pink line. Make sure that's following all the way down. Fold it out and then just pin in place top and bottom to start you off without moving your hand. This pattern piece on here. You can see it's still, I've not cut this out yet, have I? So it's all still only just been rough cut out from pattern drafting. Okay, so that's on there. So let's cut this one out. But I'm now confident that that stripe is in the right place for when we come to match the top of our pockets. The proof will be in the proof of the pudding, and all that will be in the eating. It should be fine. I also need to choose a lining fabric for this as well, don't I? I haven't got any lining fabric yet sorted out. Just been talking about our wool. So there's one pocket cut out. I'm keeping hold of my scraps because they'll be useful for things. So now what I'm going to do now is, before I take off my pattern completely, let me put a pin through to remind me that's the top side that I'm working with. Now I'll take the rest of the pins out. No tailor's tacks on there, so we don't need to worry. Let's keep that one there. So now what I need to do is, because we've cut out one this way, we need to cut out one with the pattern the other way up, so we've got a left and a right. This is back to that mirroring. So let's fold that pattern piece back onto that dotted line we've put on. Find a pink line to follow. That will go there. Just make, oh, see it now. You see we can't use that pink line because I'm going to be off the pattern. Can you see how when I fold that out I'm off? So let's move it back one to find the next pattern, pink, and now we can see I've got a line of fabric down here. So match it up at the top with the start of the pink line, just there, pin in, and then make sure your line is following your pink line all the way down. And there we go. We're going to have two very nicely pattern matched pockets on there. And it is worth taking the extra time. I know it's only doll's clothes. You know, if you just want to do it quick and easy, then absolutely fine. That's all you need to do. But for me, I just like the extra detail that this will hopefully give us when we're looking at it. And it just makes it look nice as well, rather than it just jarring your head a little bit every time you look at it. So let's take off these edges just to make that right. To get our curve nicely matched, so they'll be the same. And then again, before I take off the pattern piece, I'm just going to be putting that double pin through to mark that that's our correct piece. And then what we can do is we can lie that down with right side up and that one with right side up, and we can see we've got a left and a right. So as always, I'm going to now, let's just put those wrong sides together, pop a pattern piece back on top, because I always keep my pattern pieces on my pieces of work until we've actually come to use them, because that way then you don't ever lose them or think, now where's it gone, did I cut out enough? So that's all fine. If you want to use tailor's tacks as well to mark your buttonholes, you can do, but I'm not going to at this stage. I'm just going to leave that there. So let me just go and choose some lining fabric, because we need to cut out some of these in the lining fabric as well. Okay, so this is the fabric I've chosen. I think it's going to make a nice lining. Looks nice against the fabric with the pink. It's just got those pink tones in it, and that little beigey colour, and I think it's going to match the same sort of colour as Bramble, so I think that'll look quite nice. So it's just a fat quarter I've got of this. That's plenty for doing for the waistcoat. So let's fold this in half. Fold it this way, then you'll be able to see where we are. And the way that we make sure that the fabric is on straight of grain is when we've got a selvage edge like this, we will measure from the selvage edge here across to our line. So let's just have a look and see how much fabric we need. That needs to be on the fold, and we need enough for this piece as well, so we need a bit more. So I'm just roughly placing those on just so that we can get that about right just before we even start. Right, that's up there. So let me just measure this now just to make sure that this is right. So that's 30.5 centimetres, and that's 31, so it's just coming out a bit. So I'm just measuring it top and bottom, and that will make sure that that's about right for us in terms of being straight of grain. So we want it to be straight of grain. And now that we've got that in place, we're going to get our pattern pieces, and I can now make sure that's right at the top, which it is. Oops, and I'm off camera so you can't see. But I'm literally just going to pin these on and cut these out exactly the same way as we did our other pattern pieces. But with our front, we've now not got a stripe to follow our straight of grain. And it is important when we're cutting out anything for clothing that we have it on straight of grain. So let me just pin this on place with that one first of all. Okay, so that's got that in there. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to use this line where the buttonholes are as being our straight of grain for this. So I'm going to pop the pattern piece onto the fabric. Just make sure you've got enough room at the top and that you've not got a difference. Sometimes when fabrics are cut, and you could have it skew if at the top without really realising it. And then let's just pop a pin in there just to hold that in place. So I'm just going to put one little pin in just crosswise at the moment, because then I can still twist this if I need to. And now I'm going to measure from the white edge of the grain line and across, and we're just 9.4 centimetres, and let's go to the top one and see where we are. Oh yeah, we're not straight yet. So now what I'm doing is I'm just twisting this the top of the pattern piece so that we can be the same top and bottom. So I've just put a pin in to hold it. So to that point there 9.4, and to that point there 9.4. So I now know that this pattern piece is straight, so I can now go ahead and pin that with confidence to my fabric. If ever you've had a t-shirt that doesn't want to lie flat along the seam lines when you're trying to iron it, that's all because it's been cut slightly off grain, and it does make a difference with clothes, especially on dressmaking clothes when you're sewing for yourself or for children. So it is always worth knowing how to just get yourself onto grain, because then that fabric and pattern piece will always launder and sit nicely for you. Okay, so we're going to cut those two out now, front and a back. How are we going to do this? Are we going to line it? It's going to add bulk. Right, I'm not going to line mine, but if you're going to line yours, you will also cut out a mirrored pair of your pocket piece as well. I'm not lining mine, but I will show you how to do it. Okay, I'll just carry on cutting these out and I'll come back to you. Okay, so we've now got all of our pattern pieces cut out. So we've got our two back pieces, our lining and our main cut out on the fold. We've then got our pieces for the front, and we've got a lining and a main left and a lining and a main right. And then I've also got our pockets cut out. So we've got two here, a left and a right cut out of the pocket. And just so we can demonstrate how it looks with a lined pocket, and I can show you the process, then I've also got a lined pocket here as well for you. So I've just cut one out of that. You won't have this though. You'll either have just your two top fabrics for your pocket, or you'll have your two of your top fabrics and you'll have two corresponding in your lining. But you may just want to wait until the end, and I'll put a note on the screen here as to which I think works best for you. So if you're at this stage and you want to cut out with me then, and you trust what I say, then you can obviously do that at the same time. But I've just marked this one because I didn't pattern match this one. I've just put a cross on with pins, so I don't know that I won't get this pocket that I just cut out quickly with the two that I have actually pattern matched. So they've only got one single pin in showing the right side, and this one's got a cross in it on the pins there. So I know that that's the one that I'm using to demonstrate the lined version of that. Okay, so that can just get pinned together. So let's put all of our pattern pieces just together to tidy ourselves away for the moment. Now, just to confirm as well, I haven't put tailor's tacks on my lining. I've only just left those on the top fabric.